Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Benjamin, and welcome to today's video. Before I get started, I'd like to say likes, comments, subscriptions. I greatly appreciate them, and I thank each and every one of you for all of the support you've given me uh, in the past couple of years, and especially this year. Useful links will be down in the description. This includes, of course, a link to my model and a link to the Patreon. I'm just getting that out of the way first, right? Anyway, so let's get talking about what I want to talk about a little bit today, which is it's about Minnesota. I think a lot of people are noticing that the polls indicate that Minnesota is a lot closer than maybe was expected going into this year. And I think part of that is maybe a confirmation. I remember I was doing Minnesota right as all this protests, riots, all this stuff from the Minneapolis George Floyd stuff was going on, and I didn't want to make a judgment call back then about whether or not this would help one side or another. And I think it's time we revisited it now that we actually have polling. Recent high-quality polling, I think a lot of it has narrowed considerably since that point, and certainly over the course of the year. Now, is this an indication that these riots and protests and all this stuff is helping Donald Trump? You be the judge of that. But I think it's not an unreasonable take to make. And the reason why I want to go to that and say that is because we go back in time a little bit to 1917 and to a far-off land called Russia, where a certain radical party within the far left within Russian politics, the Bolsheviks, they campaigned and tried to gain support among the people in Russia after the fall of the Tsar and the shake-up within their own government, and where they tried to hold an actual election, which immediately the Bolsheviks said, yeah, we're not going to follow the results of that, and they took over. But one of the things they campaigned on and spoke about was peace. And if you're able to give peace to the people, that's a surprisingly effective tool and a surprisingly effective way to get them to support you. They may not be getting everything they want, but if they have peace, it means that they do have hope of making it without being interfered by a war, riots, protests, civil unrest, that sort of thing. And I think a lot of voters in a lot of the Minneapolis suburbs, the Iron Range, they're seeing what's going down in Minneapolis proper and St. Paul, and they're thinking, wait a second, hold on a moment. What's going on here? Especially with these groups saying we're coming for the suburbs next. At least the more vocal, violent elements of it. What does that mean for me? Especially when one party is calling out specifically to defund the police, as well as take away our ability to defend ourselves in case the police can't get here or just don't exist. And by the way, I'm not trying to say this is exactly what's happening. I'm just trying to explain why it's not an unreasonable take to say that the civil unrest has helped Donald Trump in certain areas. Whether or not that reflects in polling is another story altogether, especially nationally. But in certain statewide polls, I have noticed a narrowing since all this happened. And that's the thing. What are the suburban voters supposed to think when they hear defund the police and gun control, along with all this civil unrest, and saying, yeah, no, they're all just peaceful protesters, especially from media outlets who are trying to remain unbiased, which I think media really needs to do, okay? They're trying. But part of that is they also have to condemn the violence, the rioting, the looting, the burning down of small businesses, that sort of thing. But I haven't really seen it all that much. Maybe it's because I don't watch a lot of mainstream news these days. Insert witty joke about who in the world watches mainstream news. I do like to read. I try to get as many perspectives as I can. But going back on this topic, or going back to this topic, do you support the candidate that is saying, hey, we do need law enforcement, we do need some sort of reasonability, we do need some sort of structure? Or do you support the people who are saying, no, this is all fine, everything is fine, I am perfectly okay with the events that are unfolding right now as the house burns down? Again, I'm not trying to justify any sort of reaction to this. I'm not trying to take one side or another. I'm just trying to explain why it would be easy for a person in this situation to rationalize saying, well, there's one person calling for law and order, and there's another, and the rest are calling for more chaos, effectively. If that makes any sense, and I hope it does. So could Donald Trump pull off Minnesota? I don't think it's impossible. I certainly think it's a lot more likely than I think a lot of people would have expected going into this cycle, or at the start of all the civil unrest. And polls seem to indicate that. And I could go back and explain, the stuff regarding... I could go back and explain it. That was clumsily worded. I could go back and I could say, yeah, this is similar to what was happening in 1968, where you had Hubert Humphrey, who didn't seem all that concerned with the chaos that surrounded the DNC, versus Richard Nixon, who said, bring back law and order. And guess what won the suburbs? That would be Nixon. That would be Nixon. Now, yes, there was also some George Wallace stuff going on in the Deep South, but the rest of the country was pretty much, yeah, we're with the law and order stuff. Especially a very important group in a lot of elections, and that's suburban women. And I was looking through, and somebody was like, oh my god, this poll from Minnesota showing Biden and Trump tied in the state is garbage. Because they weighted it or polled 88% white people. And my first thought about that poll was, well, yeah, it makes sense that they would poll that many white people in Minnesota, and they probably underpolled white people. Because Minnesota is so white that Wonder Bread tried to package it and sell it in a grocery store as bread. But that's the other thing. The only real population center in Minnesota is Minneapolis-St. Paul. You do have Duluth, but that's in the Iron Range. And other than Duluth, that entire area is extremely rural. Is, from my knowledge of it, conservative. It's just Duluth and the rest of the area is kind of, and the rest of the Iron Range still voted Democrat because the local Democrats are a little bit more empathetic towards more conservative and when I say local, I mean county level and even city level, towards the more conservative rural voters up there. Whether that holds nationally and going forward, that's another story altogether. If we remember correctly, in the 2018 midterms, and I normally don't like using midterms to project, presidential elections because things are often skewed heavily towards one party or another, Minnesota was the only state to have a net positive Republican gain in its House composition. And in a Democratic wave year, in a traditionally blue state, that should not happen. Especially when you have two Democrats on the Senate ballot who won, a Democrat running for governor who won, and in a state that hasn't voted for a Republican since 1972, where Nixon thrashed George McGovern everywhere except for McGovern's home state of Massachusetts. The other thing I guess I'll talk a little bit about is, I'm not going to really talk about the DNC. I just don't find it interesting to do convention reviews. I think they're a bit just dull. And what else am I going to be able to add that hasn't already been said? But I have heard some concern about the people who were saying that Biden is the nominee. I've also heard a little bit of concern that Kamala Harris is the vice presidential nominee from Democrats. Now, Biden, because he's extremely old, he's kind of from a different era. He has his own problems with race relations, the whole crime bill, but also some rather interesting comments, including a time where on television he said the N-word twice in a row. Yes, that's a thing, actually. Look it up, okay? That's actually something that happened. And, of course, saying that he didn't want his kids to grow up in a racial jungle, or that if a black person was debating whether or not to vote for him, that they weren't black, or that black people don't have diversity of thought unlike Latinos. Yeah. Now, that's not to say Donald Trump is perfect with race relations. He's far from it. But you don't have this history of that level of, oh my God, how do you get away with saying that level of stuff? But then again, Democrats will say, yeah, Donald Trump has that, and I always ask them, okay, name me the quotes, and they just get pissed at me and call me a racist. Yes, that's actually something that has happened. Anyway, but the problem a lot of them have is that, will Biden even make 4 years? You could argue the same thing about Donald Trump, but I think Republicans are a little less concerned because Mike Pence is waiting in the wings, and they're okay with Mike Pence because he's a little bit more of a traditional conservative. But the pick of Kamala Harris, I think you have to go back to my hater's guide to the Democratic primaries, where I think at the end I said Kamala Harris would be the nominee, which was mostly meant to be a bit of a joke, but also, honestly, I felt that the Democrats would want Kamala Harris somewhere on there because she fit the bill of what the Democrats were trying to play off of, which is they wanted a woman and they wanted someone who wasn't white. And she checked both boxes. Now, you may say that's a little bad to think about, but the Democrats, in my mind, are very much a party of the establishment will choose your candidate for you. And, well, they got Kamala Harris on the ticket. And the way they did it, I think, is very wrong. And I think I'm not going to go so far as to call it racist because, but you can so easily make it so because Biden, and you could even argue it's sexist. Because instead of saying, I'm going to pick the most qualified candidate to be my vice presidential nominee, Biden just straight out said, I'm picking someone who isn't white and a woman. Not only did he dramatically narrow his choices, but he said that the first criteria isn't your qualifications, it isn't your record, it isn't your stance on the positions, it isn't even for an X factor, such as, oh, this person is from a potentially competitive state, or this person will unify the party, or this person is going to bring us together, or reach out to new groups of voters who aren't in our coalition. He just straight up said that his first criteria were to choose based off of race and choose based off of gender. How? In a world where we're supposed to not care, or more accurately, not evaluate people based off of the color of their skin or their chromosomes, how can you get away with saying that I'm picking based off of race and gender? How? I'm not trying to say that the Democrats are, horrible people or anything like that. I do have Democratic friends. I do have people who are voting for the Biden-Harris ticket. But it just screams to me tone deaf. And the Republican Party is not immune to this, nor is the Republican Party blame-free in this sort of thing. However, it doesn't scream, or it doesn't seem right for the party that is supposed to be about unity and coming together and making racism and sexism a thing of the past to pick based off of race and gender. Does that make any sense? I tried to get that in my evaluation of Kamala Harris as a VP nominee, but I admit I kind of went into some joking territory with that one, as well as evaluating her past as a politician, a district attorney, an attorney general for the state of California, and not into the actual process. But yeah, so Donald Trump absolutely should be spending resources in Minnesota, especially now. And he should be targeting the Iron Range as well as the Minneapolis-St. Paul suburbs and trying to hold on to his rural margins. And actually, I would be trying to expand them, and I'd be doing the same thing in a lot of these states like Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, Florida, Texas, Arizona, states like that. I could see, obviously, New Hampshire needs to happen, Maine needs to happen for him to win. But we'll see going forward what happens, and I just kind of felt that this would be something topical. I felt it would be something reasonable and something that probably needs to be discussed. Anyway, I'm going to call it there. I hope you all enjoyed. See you next time. Take it easy. Have a nice day.